Hello friends, today we are going to explore something that is happening inside your mind almost every moment. Something so familiar that you probably don't even notice it anymore. There is a voice inside your head. It is constantly talking. It comments on what you see. It comments on what other people say. It reminds you of the past. It imagines the future. It judges people. It judges you. And sometimes, it simply refuses to be quiet. This voice is what we often call self-talk. And for most people, this inner conversation continues throughout the day. You wake up in the morning, and almost immediately, the mind begins talking. You think about what you have to do today. You remember something that happened yesterday. You think about something someone said to you. You imagine what might happen tomorrow. And before you even realize it, your mind has already created an entire world inside your head. The interesting thing is, most of us never stop to ask a very simple question. Who is talking, and who is listening? Think about it. Sometimes you talk to yourself in the first person. I should have done that. I need to finish this. I don't know what to do. But sometimes the conversation changes. You shouldn't have said that. Why did you do that? You always make the same mistake. And then another thought appears. Yes, but I couldn't help it. And suddenly, there is an entire conversation happening inside your head. Nobody else can hear it. But you can, and because it happens silently, you simply assume that this is who you are. This is where something very important begins. The first step toward mindfulness is not stopping your thoughts. It is noticing them, just noticing that there is a voice inside your head. A voice that is talking almost continuously. And once you notice it, something very interesting happens. For a brief moment, you are no longer completely lost in the thought. You are observing the thought. And there is a huge difference between these two states. When you are lost in a thought, you believe the thought completely. Suppose your mind says, what if something goes wrong tomorrow? If you become completely identified with that thought, your body may immediately respond with anxiety. Your heart may beat faster. Your muscles may become tense. You may feel restless. And then another thought comes. But what if it really happens? Then another one. What will I do? And another. Maybe I should prepare for the worst. One thought creates another, and another, and another, until a situation that does not even exist in reality has created a very real emotional reaction inside your body. This is one of the reasons why overthinking can become so exhausting. You may be physically sitting in your room, but mentally, you could be fighting an imaginary battle. You may be lying peacefully in your bed, but your mind could be having an argument with someone who isn't even there. You replay conversations. You imagine future conversations. You remember something embarrassing from years ago. You think about what you should have said. You imagine what you will say next time. And the mind keeps producing more material. The remarkable thing is that the event may have lasted only 5 minutes. But the mind can continue experiencing it for 5 hours. And sometimes, for years. This is why negative experiences often have a much stronger psychological impact than positive ones. Think about your day. Maybe you had a wonderful meal. Maybe you saw a beautiful sunset. Maybe someone smiled at you. Maybe something went exactly the way you wanted. You enjoyed it, and then you moved on. But suppose someone insults you, or ignores you, or says something that hurts your ego. Suddenly, the mind becomes extremely active. Why did they say that? What did they mean? Maybe they don't respect me. I should have replied differently. Next time I'll tell them. And now that one event has become fuel for the mind, you replay it, you analyze it, you create different versions of it. And every time you replay it, you experience some part of that emotional reaction again. This is why awareness is so important. Because the goal is not to make the mind stop thinking. Thinking is a natural function of the human mind. The problem is not thought itself. The problem begins when you don't know that you are thinking. When you become completely identified with every thought that appears in your mind. You don't experience the thought as a thought. You experience it as reality. And this is where awareness changes everything. Imagine that you are sitting beside a road. Cars are passing continuously. One car comes, then another, then another. You don't have to stop the cars. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts can be approached in exactly the same way. A thought appears. You notice it. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to argue with it. You don't have to believe it. And you don't have to push it away. You simply recognize, this is a thought. That simple recognition creates a little distance. And in that distance, there is freedom. Suppose a thought appears. I am going to fail. Instead of immediately believing it, you can simply notice. The mind is producing a thought about failure. That is, a completely different position. You are no longer completely inside the thought. You are witnessing it. And the moment you witness it, you have already created some space between yourself and your mind. This observing presence is extremely important, because the observer is not the same thing as the thought being observed. If you can observe your thoughts, then, at least in that moment, you are not merely the thought. You are aware of the thought. And this is where a deeper form of self-knowledge begins. Most people are very good at observing other people's repetitive patterns. You may sit with your family during a dinner and notice that someone keeps complaining about the same person. The same criticism, the same story, the same judgment, year after year. You can easily see the pattern in them. But when it comes to yourself, it becomes much harder. Because when the pattern is happening inside your own mind, you are usually identified with it. So you don't see it as a pattern. You see it as truth. You think, this is simply how things are. But one day, you notice something. You notice that you have been thinking the same thought for years. The same fear, the same insecurity, the same complaint, the same story about yourself. And suddenly, you see it, not as who you are, but as a pattern occurring in your mind. That moment of recognition is powerful, because awareness has entered the process. And when awareness enters, the automatic pattern is no longer completely automatic. You now have a choice. You can continue the thought, or you can simply observe it. This is one of the foundations of mindfulness. Not controlling the mind by force. Not fighting your thoughts, but becoming conscious of what is happening inside you. Because an unconscious mind reacts, an aware mind can respond. There is another important thing to understand. When the mind remains negative for a long time, it doesn't just affect your thoughts. It affects your emotions, your behavior, your relationships, and eventually, it can influence the way you experience your entire life. If you constantly tell yourself, nothing ever works for me, you cannot trust anyone, something bad is always going to happen, I am not good enough, then gradually, you begin looking at life through that mental filter. You notice things that confirm your beliefs. You interpret situations according to them, and you behave according to them. So the mind can become a kind of filter through which you experience reality. This doesn't mean that simply thinking positively will magically change your life. Life contains real difficulties, real suffering, real uncertainty. The deeper point is different. Your habitual state of consciousness influences how you interpret what happens to you, how you respond, what choices you make, and what kind of patterns you continue creating. If you are constantly reacting, you have very little space for conscious choice. But if you become aware, even for a few seconds, there is a gap. Something happens, a thought appears, and instead of immediately reacting, you pause, you observe, and then, you choose. That small gap may seem insignificant, but it can completely change the way you live. Because freedom does not necessarily mean that you control everything that happens outside you. Freedom can begin with something much simpler, not being controlled by everything that happens inside you. And perhaps, this is the deeper meaning of spiritual awakening. It is not about becoming someone extraordinary. It is not about escaping from life. And it is not about eliminating every thought from your mind. It begins with something much simpler. You become aware. You notice the voice. You notice the thoughts. You notice the emotions. You notice the patterns. And slowly, you begin to realize something profound. There is a difference between you and the activity happening inside your mind. Thoughts are appearing, but you are aware of them. Emotions are appearing, but you are aware of them. The inner voice is speaking, but you can hear it. And if you can hear the voice, then perhaps you are not the voice itself. This realization doesn't necessarily make the mind completely silent, but it changes your relationship with the mind. And that may be far more important, because the goal is not to destroy thought. The goal is to stop being unconsciously controlled by thought. So the next time you notice your mind creating a story, don't immediately fight it. Don't immediately believe it. Just pause and observe. Listen to the voice inside your head, as if you were listening to someone else speaking. Notice what it says. Notice how often it repeats itself. Notice how it reacts to criticism. Notice how it creates fear about the future. Notice how it keeps returning to the past. And then, simply ask yourself, who is aware of all this? Don't rush to find an intellectual answer. Just notice the awareness that is already present. Because perhaps the beginning of inner peace is not making the mind silent. Perhaps it is discovering that you don't have to follow every thought that the mind produces. A thought can appear and disappear. A fear can appear and disappear. An emotion can appear and disappear. But awareness can remain. And the more consciously you learn to rest in that awareness, the less power unnecessary mental activity has over you. That is where mindfulness begins. That is where self-knowledge begins. And perhaps that is also where the journey inward truly begins.